I'm going to get started with a little PowerPoint to go over access measures, and then we'll get started and get to meet all these wonderful filmmakers. Thank you for joining us at today's RestFest Film Festival filmmaker panel. Today we are meeting the filmmakers of the Spaces/Routes program. We have begun recording. I'm going to begin with a self-description and an introduction of myself. So my name is Bec Miriam. I'm the founder and organizer of RestFest Film Festival. I am a Crip Mad ADHD non-binary filmmaker and artist myself, and I live on Kumeyaay land. I am a light, pale skin white person with dark brown curly hair. I'm wearing a purplish sweater today, and I have lots of books and artwork behind me. Here are the access measures we have for today. Automated closed captioning and transcription are enabled. To turn that on, at the bottom of the Zoom window, there is a little CC and a rounded rectangle to turn on captions, and a little caret going up or down next to it to turn on transcription. If you're on a mobile device, you can swipe all the way to the right at the bottom of the bar, click the three dots inside a circle, click Captions and Translations to view transcripts. Audio describing. Visual descriptions will be provided by speakers. Please maximize your comfort. This may mean having your camera off or on, coming late or leaving early, lying down, stimming, wearing comfortable attire, communicating via chat only or not at all, and anything else you feel will maximize your comfort. Please try to keep your camera stable if you have your video on to accommodate dizziness. A quiet/low sensory breakout room will be available to enter at any time if you'd like to take a break without having to exit the event entirely. Please remain quiet and with video off if you are there. This is recorded and will be available online afterwards. And live access support is available by reaching out. Today, Moya Williams is here today to provide access artistry. You can speak aloud or chat Moira today. Moira, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Beck, and welcome everyone. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm excited to hear and learn about the films and uh, what all the filmmakers have to say. So I'm excited that we all get to do that together, and I get to see some of you again today too. So my name is Moira, and my image description is that I have long dark hair, but it's pulled back today behind my head, and I have a little bit of a bang over on my left side of my face, and I have a long face. It's a light-skinned indigenous person of um, Lenape, Kickapoo, Wyandotte, and Sami descent, and I have dark blue eyes that are slightly almond shaped, and I have black eyebrows. I'm wearing eyeglasses that are lightly framed in a thin red wire, and they're kind of oversized. I have a dark greenish bluish jacket on with a zip front that has hot pink around the collar that's up around my neck, and and it has black spots like leopard spots on it, and I have a crew neck t-shirt underneath. Behind me is a black and white squiggly rolling background, and it's there for you to be able to find me in case you need me. I welcome any kind of uh, questions or any kind of support that you might require, and we'll work it out together. Thanks, Moira out.
Thank you, Moira. I see in your name it says Access Magician, which I love. That's awesome. I would love to go around and have each of you give a self-description, a brief description of your film, and what inspired you to make it. We can go in order of the programmed films. Moya, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Moya Bailey. My film is called You Just Watch and See. I am a Black woman with a black mock turtleneck on. I have really dark navy glasses frames and kind of a short fro that I'm rocking today.
Thank you so much, Moya. Would you mind giving a description of your film and what inspired you to make it as well?
Yes, You Just Watch and See is a film about my cousin Dolly, who had an accident that transformed her life, and she saved her own life. And it's part of a larger project, and this particular story didn't quite fit in there, but I wanted people to meet her and see what a brilliant, wonderful person she was.
Thank you, Moya. I feel like in the short time that we're with Dolly, like it's impossible to not fall in love with her. So thank you for bringing her to us. Angel,
Hello. My name is Angel. I'm an Asian woman, East Asian, with long dark hair, parted kind of in the middle. I'm wearing a teal blue top, and I do have my dragon earrings on for Lunar New Year. And behind me is just my messy home office with my props and cameras still in their place.
thank you,
Um,
Angel.
and my film. So my film is Extra Credit. It's a stop motion. It is about my memories of school, like my early memories of school and the hardships I've had with it. And it's just little vignettes that's set on a desk because that's where we usually are at school. So just little objects here and there that's illustrating my memories.
Thank you, Angel. Um, do you have anything in mind for what inspired you to make it and go ahead with creating extra credit?
I love doing stop motion because I like working by myself. I get too much um like anxiety working with other people, even though I love people, but it's just like bothering them or having that control, I guess. So with stop motion, I'm able to kind of do everything on my own and in my own time. A lot of times, like I would do it at 3 a.m. and not worry about anyone else but myself. And I think I just have a lot of mundane, small memories that would pop up in my head. I have a notebook full of them. So I wanted to make something out of that. And um, so I think school was one of the themes that seems to kind of pop in a lot of like, um, not traumatic, but just very like hard childhood things that would happen in school. So that's why I wanted to create something in that setting and focus my memories on that.
Thank you, Angel.
Mhm.
The the way you use humor inside of these, more difficult moments too. Like it's such a funny film and such a heartfelt film. Yeah, thank you, Angel.
Yeah.
I think Jay, I think you're next.
Hello, I am Jay Afrisando, pronounced he, him. Joining from an unceded territory of the Awaswas-speaking Whippy tribe, colonially known as Santa Cruz, California. Self-description, I am hearing neurodivergent. I'm an Asian male with medium skin tone. I have shoulder-length black hair, untied. I'm wearing a gray shirt and black jacket. Behind me is a cream-colored wall and partial view of window blinds.
Thank you.
Uh,
And a little about your film would be great.
yeah. Yeah. So I created Aural architecture as a kind of documentary, also counter archive of how all people with hourly divergent hearing can access sound. So I'm in the early years, I focus on oral diversity, which is diversity, acknowledge that we are hearing and listen differently. So I learned how sound is not only the thing hearing people can access, and this film was inspired by Jeffrey Mansfield's Sign and Sound workshop with the Sharjah deaf community, I think back in 2007 to 2004. And I'm basically the workshop focused on how deaf people access sound via vibration and then communicate them back via sign language in a non-lexicalized signs. So I'm wondering, doing a little bit different thing with expression of words, and then I invited a deaf collaborator and a hearing collaborator to interpret sound that originates in the mind and then communicate it and manifest it via sign language and spoken voice.
Thank you, Jay. I think similar to Angel's film and talking to other attendees too, that there's this presence of fun in your film. Like the folks in it, just it feels like there's joy there inside of this exploration of something that is, very conceptual, and that kind of interplay is very exciting.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, Troels.
Hey all, I'm Troels. I'm an artistic neuroqueer white Nordic Scandinavian male with what we in Denmark would team pate colored hair or municipal colored hair, so like a dirty blonde, and a light beard, wearing a dark navy t-shirt. I'm sitting in front of a white wall and a gray curtain, which behind you can see the morning light here in Taipei starting to shine through. My movie is called Not Included Embedded, and it takes inspiration in my architectural work, where I'm working with developing a notion that's a concept called autistic architectural approach, when I'm trying, as the title in the film also suggests, is to embed disabled ways into architecture rather than just include them, because inclusion often means that they can be taken away as the first thing afterwards, where, for example, we don't consider, I think most architects don't consider stairs an access element, which they obviously are, because without them it's very difficult to reach the second floor for anyone. And I want all different ways of disability to inform architecture in the same very embedded and natural way. And the movie takes place, it's a range of shots from all over Taipei, where I'm now based, that are cut out in geometrical shapes, which is a reflection of some of my photographic work that is trying to embed my artistic perception within the filmmaking itself. And all of these shapes overlap and create new cities from the existing city, all focusing on the informal aspects of the architecture here, which I see very much as sort of a traditional architecture that in some ways are reflecting a lot of the disability informed ways that I'm trying to get contemporary architecture to engage with. Whereas it's when you walk down through the streets here, you might think of a city like Taipei. They have all of the metal cages and other things built out on top, which is actually the city, the residents themselves that have added to the buildings. And so in that way, rather than walking down through a space only designed by a few architects, you're actually walking down through a space that is informed by all of the people that live there. And in that way, it's like a spatial cacophony of all the residents' spatial voices. And so I'm trying to see if there's ways that we can incorporate everyone in the architecture we do, and not just us architects, because that's not that that will very quickly become very insular. And thank you all for being here. And Xingning Kuaila, Happy New Year.
Thank you, Troels. Happy New Year. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's so much present that your background with architecture and photography and film and seeing that all come together in this work is it's really special, and that structural element coming into film is very unique. So thank you. Rae.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rae. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm based on the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh unceded territories, colonially known as Vancouver, BC, Canada. And I'm the filmmaker behind Before Transforming We Exist. I have red hair that's a little bit longer on the top and short on the sides, blue eyes, very pale skin, and I am wearing a black satin ribbon as a scarf and a white tank top, and I have kind of black and red tattoos. The inspiration behind my film is that I got commissioned by a local film festival where the collective I'm a part of called Shapeshifter applied the year before, and then we got it the second year. So then kind of the original idea we'd applied with was no longer as pertinent to us. So we changed directions, and I was really into literature at the time around rewilded spaces, so spaces that are left to nature in cities. And where I live in Vancouver, there's quite a bit of those spaces, but getting permission to film in public spaces is always interesting. So the festival is also related to movement and dance. So just kind of being within those spaces and working on crypt time was enough inspiration to make this piece of video art. Thank you.
Thank you, Rae. That Yeah, I love how you mentioned crypt time too, because there's such a presence of time and keeping time in your film, like the clock ticking and that interplay with the space and the rewilding. Yeah, it's really, really beautiful and peaceful and invigorating too. Thank you. Um, for each of you, what does it mean to you to be a CRIP, disabled, neurodivergent, filmmaker and artist? And how do you feel that impacts your work and your process? If you're all right going in the same order, Moya, would you mind going first?
Yes, I would say I am a scholar of disability studies and also a practitioner of disability justice. And so, even as somebody who came to understanding myself as disabled a little later, I was already thinking about disability in relationship to the kind of work I wanted to make. That looks like thinking about process much more than product, and wanting to make sure that the experience that my cousin Dolly had while we were shooting was one that she enjoyed. And that meant taking breaks and laughing about many different things and getting off tangent and just having room for that. So, process was a really important experience and also something that I wanted to be reflected in the film itself, as you saw a bit of our process in between setting up shots.
Thank you, Moya. That joy when I is it you clapping in front? And yeah, I see such a good moment.
Yeah, that's my friend Whitney. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's a for folks who haven't seen it that someone's slating in front of Dolly's face, and there's like a reaction there that's so joyful and fun. Um, Angel.
So yeah, I mentioned about liking to work by myself. I think that's the main for the process, similar to Moya of just um, yeah, having because yeah, filmmaking is such a group thing. I studied film in college, and it was just very overwhelming. Everyone has their parts, but either I like to control everything or just pleasing everyone, I guess. So I feel like my voice is always like lost. So for my process, this is, the time I can tell my story, visualize how I want to visualize, even like, yeah, with stop motion, with making things with my hands. I don't need to, like rent a place or figure out if I have the rights to film somewhere, or even like find actors, like all of that things. Um, and then, yeah, I able to film whenever I need to film. I don't have to depend on someone's schedule, and starting and stopping. I think that's always my main thing that like deters me from making a film of just like starting, because in my head it has to be perfect. Everything has to be in the right, space before I can even start. But when I do my stop motions, I have like my outline, and a lot of it is improvised a little bit. And I say to myself, it's okay, I don't need like the perfect script before I film. So I'm able to kind of improvise as I go and even as I edit to change things and allow myself to not have that pressure. But on the flip side, I think it will take me like years to finish something if I don't give myself a deadline. So I do try to give myself a deadline. And then with stop motion, it is hard to start and stop. So sometimes I do not sleep for like 48 hours until like I finish filming. Otherwise it will like sit there for a year and then I'm just like, I don't want to touch it. Um, and then for the story itself, so I also later in life I was diagnosed with OCD and CPTSD, and a combination of that is just a lot of like more on the O part of obsessive thoughts, and it keeps running in my head over and over again. So that's why I have all these memories, even like from early childhood, that just sticks with me and I can't unstick them. So I think with writing my stories, I find a place to put these memories, even though to me it feels like mundane, but I think it actually has meaning. What like, why would I hold on to them for so long? So I have a place to put all those little snippet of memories and then kind of find the pattern of why I held it on. And I think it's, with the complex post-traumatic disorder of finding that pattern and how it shaped who I am today. So that's the storytelling part. So yeah, I just want to say it was like, I don't know, even like introducing and hearing Moya talk, I was already feeling so like touched and like emotional because I feel like we don't talk about that. Like, filmmakers are just creative people and then they're just grouped into a creative group. So it's very nice to have this.
Thank you so much, Angel. Everything you said, it was so relatable. So thank you for putting all of that into words. Jay.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not a filmmaker in a conventional sense. I'm more of an artist and now a scholar in our diversity. I'm late in identifying and acknowledging myself as neurodivergent, living with ADHD. And I view the world from the state of masking. I I was a composer and musician working on music from the perspective of single quote normal hearing. But now my starting point is always from hearing listening. And I always treat media, including access itself, and relationships between the parties involved within the art making, and including the audiences, and including those who are not typically considered part of the whole architecture of music. Uh, um, uh, um, and those elements become the my main artistic point of views. I also use filmmaking in a way to invite people to not only to uh, create their own hearing listening, but also to access hearing listening in different ways, different access points as well. Um, and and even within that hearing listening diversity and treating access media as artistic resources. And then I found that uh, what I do and also like what disabled folks do with the artistic making, what we do is more of an anti-disciplinary art making. So we are not longer seeing, oh, this is about film with visual, but also this is about music with sound. But those elements can be viewed and perceived in so broadly ways. So I feel like being being neurodivergent myself, I feel like it really has impacted my work and my practice in a way that yes, there are so many new things I encountered, but also this newness has brought me back to the root of art making, which is our body, mind, and our relationship with the whole architecture of space that we are living in.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned this invitation into this process, and into this world and architectural space, like you say, and I'm thinking about it as an architecture, um, is is really really interesting. Yeah, speaking of architecture, Troels.
Yeah. Well, I think actually I'm also filmmaking is part of my practice, but it's not the primary that I do. But I think in all of my practice, what I've sort of, because also similar to Jay, I came out self-realized as autistic at the age of 35 back in 2019. Realizing that I'm autistic was the best thing that ever happened to me because it gave me a new language with which to write myself back into my life. And I've been very lucky that throughout my creative practice, I've always been able to follow my intuition in ways and also have had teachers and others where it was allowed to do so. And therefore, I could then start to look back at my old work and see what I was actually constantly trying to tell myself. And I think for my practice, what I'm trying to do is like, I want to start in this ability, not as a limiting, but as a generative force. I think that's what is in this whole this whole thing of by embedding things within that. Like I want to be able to have disabled ways show up in everything, so that it's not only when it's quote unquote about disability. Because I think so often we get caught in this dialectic between explaining and exploring, where disabled people are often tasked with having to constantly explain ourselves and explaining the gap to normativity that exists for others. And we have to fill that in for others so that they can see us as whole. And that means that there's very limited space left for us to simply explore the ways that we are. And that's what I'm trying to open up space for, and also open up the work in a way that it's not dictating, but it's sort of like trying to present itself and trying to always have different openings for the audience to embed themselves within the work and make their own impressions from within, and sort of hopefully they themselves will see reflections of thoughts or ideas that they can then take further and explore. So I think that's where it all sort of try to come together. So thank you.
Thank you, Troels. I agree. A big part of RestFest for me and the programming was not requiring us disabled folks to make films about disability and explaining ourselves. So, yeah, I appreciate you talking about that. Rae.
Hello again. I would say the biggest way that disability and access needs impact my work is just the slowness. I am a film school dropout, so filmmaking is part of my process, but just the pace at which film school wants everyone to operate was really unsustainable for me. So I burned out quite quickly. And then this was actually the first film I completed since that experience that was just like a full 180. And I was very intentional about wanting to treat it that way. I did bring in collaborators, and we didn't have established roles, which was challenging, but also I think led to deeper exploration. So I was behind the camera, I was in front of the camera. There was more of an exchange of ideas. Like I didn't feel like I had to wear all the hats or make all the decisions. Like I wanted input, and it was encouraged to take breaks and come back to things. And we had about 6 months to make the film from pre to post production. And also, we were still part of a cohort through the Festival of Recorded Movement here in Vancouver, Forum for short. And there was a wonderful workshop that someone locally named Nash Wong did on incorporating access needs and disability justice into the filmmaking process. And they had previously done the program too. So just having people share their experiences and having that kind of openly explored and discussed was really helpful too. And I think took a lot of pressure off what Angel mentioned about, the final product. It's nice to have a deadline, but it's also nice to just kind of play around and see what emerges in that time. And I would say the other thing that I kind of strive to do is just view all my work as kind of adding to like a living archive of people with similar experiences. But I also don't, I just want my work to elicit feeling in people, but I don't necessarily try and influence what that feeling is. I'm always really open to see what comes up for collaborators and audiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Rae. The collaborative effort of it is so present in the work itself. And something I love about your work is during the credits when you and your collaborator like acknowledge each other and have this dialogue and thanking each other in your own words is really, really special. And to bring that communication of interdependence and collaboration explicitly in the credits was really, really cool and inspiring. So I want to mention if folks have any questions who are here, it's a good time if you want to put them in the chat. Welcoming y'all to think about it. I do have another question. In one way or another, I feel that all these films have a documentary aspect to them. But they're very, very different in their approaches to doing that. And I'd love to hear about how you landed on your approach, and if you can speak more on the creative choices that you made while exploring these ideas and these stories. Moya.
As I mentioned, You Just Watch and See comes out of a larger film called Misogynoir in Medicine that's looking at Black women's experiences as both healthcare providers and as patients. And so initially, I was interviewing Dolly to talk to her about her experience as a provider, and the story came out that felt so important. And I thought it might get lost in the larger documentary project. So it became important to tell it to me. And the smallness of it also gave me the wherewithal to feel like I can do a feature. You know, the it's it's a bit intimidating, but seeing something like this come together was really powerful. And one of the choices we made too was the animation, which became important because we didn't have a lot of um, footage or stock images to draw on. So we wanted to give it some texture and break it up a little bit. And so that was one of our decisions that felt important, um, particularly since in the process of doing this, Dolly passed away. And so we wanted to give the family something for uh, the wake. And that was part of us both honoring her and wanting the family also to have their own stamp of approval. Dolly got to see the first part of just her talking without the animation, which she really enjoyed. So it felt to me another piece of honoring access, the access of somebody who's being profiled in shaping how their story is told as well, felt important to me too.
Thank you, Moya. I'm sorry for your loss, and what a beautiful tribute. Um, I love hearing about the documentary process of making that finding that respect and that honor in the creative process that's so special and necessary. Angel.
So I think I'm a writer first. So like writing um, kind of like a memoirish style. And I have I also have trouble with grammar. So I know like my choice of writing in second person also has something to do with the film because it's just easy to be like second person, second person. But then I think that added to the film of putting the audience in my shoes. So I think for me, it's like being, you know, a child of immigrants, and having that whole model minority thing. It was always like hanging over me where I was not good at school at all. You know, even though English was my second language, I was still not like focused and all of that. Um, but I think in my childhood, it felt like I was an A+ student for appearance or whatever it is. But you know, as you watch my film, it is like my mom was doing everything for me. Um, so I always felt like it was a big secret that I could never like let out. But you know, now as an adult, it was easier to kind of show that I, you know, like and not be proud, but just like be like I wasn't an A+ student. You know, like by the time I was in high school, I was like failing and everything. It was like hard to keep up. Um, so also kind of connecting that with my choice of stop motion. There is like a lo-fi look to it, and also mentioning before of like just not just doing something because you know I have trouble just doing anything has to be perfect. So with the lo-fi objects, it's like it's always going to be a work in progress, and that's kind of how life is. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I like how that lo-fi feel aesthetic is. And then and I mentioned before of improvising. So I have these memories in my head that I've written down, but I also, when I see an object, it would spark a memory. So when I make something, or if I always peruse through like 99-cent stores, and I just see something and I'm like, oh, that reminds me of that. And then I'll write that memory out. So it's always like the back and forth of grabbing something or making something, to complete that image in my head.
Thank you, Angel. It's great hearing about the process, and it felt so natural, that you really followed your instinct. And I think that you really feel that there's this authenticity and honesty that is potent. Jay.
Yeah. So I think the starting point of the piece is from inviting Jamil, who is a deaf signer, and Kelsey, who is a hearing vocalist, to interpret all the lists of the sounds, quote unquote sounds, in the expression of words, and then to come up with their own ideas of what sound looks, sounds and feels like to them. And then I recorded them separately. So I ended up having kind of like a catalog of a list of oral expressions from Jamil and Galaxy. And then I was thinking of several ways of doing it actually, like the one that is currently presented at RestFest is more of a film-esque and music composition-esque, where the film gives a sense of an emotional arc based on the sounds that are displayed from the beginning to the end. But there's also other ways of doing it. Like, for example, I could also uh, like a present the piece as a catalog, like a audiovisual catalog, where the uh, viewers can access in kind of like in random ways, as they wish. Um, so there are so basically the concrete form that I landed on is more of a film, but it's basically very flexible in the form of a presentation. Um, I think what was interesting is where uh, s- I found like some hearing people uh, responded to me and gave their impressions about the film, and some of them said that, oh, is the sign language interpreting the voice? That's awesome. Like, I said, no, this is not interpret. The sign language is not interpreting the voice. It's they're recorded separately, and any expressions they came up uh, are the ones that they own. And so so basically, if I invite different persons, for example, another deaf person, another hearing vocalist, they will come up with the different expressions of what sounds are. So like in a nutshell, this film, the current version, only freezes the small part of what these two people have about the impression of sound, and what oral expressions they can manifest. But actually, if I also invite other people to come up with different oral expressions, that then we will have different stories. So yeah, so I landed on this approach currently to to approach more a film-esque and music composition-esque. Yeah.
Thank you, Jay. it's cool to see that process happening on screen in front of us, and that we're invited to see that exploration in real time, and that maybe it's not over because, like you're saying, there's possibility for more of this film and different people. Um, Troels.
Yeah. So my process is based in what I've sort of come to term as wander. So wander with an O and wander with an A. So wander with an O is sort of like I do a lot of artistic wandering around. And it's sort of for me embodies this idea of like looking for answers in places that may not be the traditional cathedrals of knowledge, and also in the places that you did not know you needed to go to. And the wander with an A is about like asking these open-ended questions that may not, the answer may not be the actual most important thing, is more where it guides you to. And so through asking open-ended questions, I start to wander around either physically in space or in your mind. And through this sort of like string together question after question that leads to the next. And then at a certain point, try and take stop and take stock at what is there now. And then try and sort of bring that together. And in this, in a specific film, I'm working. It's an extension of my work with uh, trying to embed artistic perception. And so it started out in analog film photography, where I was working with multiple exposure. At a certain point, I wanted to my films to try and capture this idea of monotropic perception, where like this is how I perceive the world. It's like I see all the little objects before seeing the whole. And I think like one very good way is like if you remember when you were a kid, you might have rolled up your hand and like sort of used it as a monocle. And just by doing that, the individual objects actually start to stand out to everyone. And so that's where these cutout shapes first emerged organically in my work. But then all of that work always have been um, on film, like analog still film photography, because like it's been important for me that the work has a voice within the work itself. So it's like a back and forth. And working with this process, like I'm never really aware of what is going to come out at the other end. There's always like a risk and a chance. And one of the interesting things for me with making this film was all of a sudden I had to shoot the film digitally. So how to transfer this like shaped these objects or these cutouts into a digital world, and all of a sudden having a little bit more control, but also when it is a film, like the layering becomes much more because it's so elongated. There's many more layerings happening all the time. But trying to bounce between this, like I have an idea of where I want to go, but also allowing the work to show me where it wants to go, and together we'll find some route that works for both of us. Has been the way to do it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Troels. Yeah, talking about the filmmaking process as a route in itself is such a great word to use. And you talking about the monotropic perception, it's something I experienced too, and thinking about your film in that way and how you put together and constructed all these geometric uh, images. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you. Rae.
There was a lot of footage to go through. And we didn't storyboard beforehand. So there was probably like 40 hours of footage, and we watched all of it and kind of worked backwards from there. I think that influenced the process, and that I always had the visual of wanting to layer different days of filming that we did. On one day, one of the dancers had a studio, so it was quite like a stark white background that we brought some kind of like trash and fabrics into. But I definitely wanted to layer that with more kind of macro shots of like foliage and bugs and good things. There's a slug that features quite prominently in our film. And the inspiration behind that was when I first met up with the collaborators. We went to Lynn Valley, which is has a river that runs off one of the mountains locally. And I spent a lot of time with a slug, and then I stepped on it by accident, and it was okay, but it really stuck with me. And then just the slowness of the process, I think I really absorbed from that slug. So having one of the dancers kind of transform and having the slug motif at like the beginning and the end of the film was influential to the process and the outcome. And I think just taking, yeah, a lot of breaks. The editing, you can go into that rabbit hole, some not to the same level as stop motion animation, but still just kind of, trying to match things up and get the vision across. It was helpful, creating the soundtrack and then using that to kind of have some cues for changing the pacing of the film, because I think I wanted it to start off kind of frenetic and every day, and then kind of slowing it down and zooming in to just like a piece of land and what's happening that maybe we don't always notice when we're in our heads and very overstimulated. um, we also had like a screening with our cohort, and that was before we added kind of the captioning and some of the spoken word, which was a discussion we edited that we had one of the days. I think that helped guide the direction away more from feedback about it feeling more like a mushroom trip or something like that before it had a little bit more context. Um, Yeah, but I feel ultimately I've finished it in 2024. So I think having that breathing space from it now, being a couple of years, I can look back on it very differently than when I was just so immersed in the process and feeling a lot more anxieties about um how things would come across or just the scheduling. I also have an analog background and started with like Super 8 film. So this was my first time working with digital editing software. And that was its own journey where, you kind of have an idea and I'd be like, but I have no way. I don't know how I'm going to make that happen. Uh, so that was a fun challenge too. And some of the mistakes ended up working in my favor for sure. Thank
Definitely in your favor. It's gorgeous. Thank you, Ray. It's talking about how much filmmaking is in the edit is so real, and bringing that slowness that you had in the filming and the edit, of course, watching so much footage back and allowing yourselves to sit and really experience all of that is really special. Um, yeah. I want to read one of these lovely chats we've got here from Adwaita. Still processing the films. Saw them right before this panel. Excellent hearing from the makers too. Each film is absolutely incredible. Cheers to all the uniquely magical directors. So nice. Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes left. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, you can do it in the chat. You're welcome to speak aloud as well. I see a heart coming in from Moira, so sweet. Yeah. In the meantime, a quick question maybe for each of you. I'd love to hear what's next for you. If there's anything you're working on, thinking about, you have been working on years ago, and maybe it's on your mind, you know, quick process. Yeah. Oh yeah.
One of the things I want to do is keep making films that have disability in them, even if not named. And so part of that is uh, just my experience as a Black person. I know a lot of people who have impairments, understand themselves to maybe be on disability, as it's called, as people say in my family. Like, I'm on disability, I'm getting a check, but they don't understand, or the identity of disability is not one that seems particularly important to them. And so I'm interested in films that explore that, like still deal with it, even when it's not explicitly named. And that's part of what's undergirding this misogynoir medicine project, looking at Black women's experiences as providers and patients, and where disability, accessibility, ableism are coming in, even when not explicitly named, is something I want to keep in as an undercurrent in all my work.
Thank you, Moya. I'm really excited to see what you make next. So thank you for keeping making. Angel.
I have a few more stop motions, like maybe five that's in my hard drive that I don't know when I'm gonna, because either I'm always like, I'll reshoot it, it doesn't look good. So we'll see what happens to that. And I guess a funny tidbit is the last for this extra credit one, my deadline was my birthday. I had like a birthday party where I had my friends show like their films, like work in progresses. And I remember editing during my party because I was like really just bad at deadlines and procrastinating and whatnot. Um, and that party was right before the COVID shutdown. So it was kind of like everyone's last party. And it was my with all these films. And another funny tidbit was I didn't have music, so my scratch track was I was just looking for any kind of background songs on my laptop, and it happened to be a Braveheart song from like the soundtrack. So that was the original stop motion was a Braveheart song with my voiceover on it. But yeah, so yeah, coming up is just a bunch more stop motions that I'll try to figure out how to release.
Having all this stuff on your hard drive is so real. Yeah, and thanks for the tidbits. Parties sounds great. Jay.
I'm currently several works. There's one coming up. Actually, it was supposed be to be showcased in January, but the situation was not very welcoming. So this opera captions in bracket, which will be showcased in April 3rd to 6th in St. Paul, Minnesota. So it's basically um, uh, well, I call it opera caption, but the term opera is not in the traditional sense. So it's an opera determined by the caption. So the main the main thread in this work is about what if captions step up, speak, and tell their stories. So basically, not only telling the historicity of captions in this opera film multifaceted performance, but also reimagining our relationship with captions. So not necessarily about film, but there's also, the captions are really tied closely to even from the beginning of film history. So yeah, that's one of my projects. And I think tying an argument with a I think hope vision from Moya. I feel like I'm hoping that film education, I mean, not only film education, but also art making education will will bring more egalitarian art making, so everyone can make their own thing from their own perspectives, and not necessarily tying the strictly to the genre styles to everything that uh, non-disabled and normal body mind dictate for disabled people. So yeah.
Thank you, Jay. I'm excited to see this next work. And talking about education, I've seen that you run some workshops too, and they seem great. I'd love to attend sometime. That educating, like you're mentioning, is so valuable. Troels.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so like the upcoming work for me is basically this artistic architectural approach, but that will take place in many different forms. I'm right now planning to do a round trip to about 8 or 9 cities in 5 different countries and host workshops and lectures in different institutions around us. In terms of filmic, right now I have a project on show in the south of Taiwan, which is called Container Camera. And it's literally I've taken a 20-foot shipping container and installed 6 different lenses in it. And it's now functioning as a multi-lens camera obscura, where people can alter the projections of the surrounding city and harborscape on different screens inside and play around with, so they can make their own recompositions of the landscape. And so I've been down there for a few times, and I've gathered a lot of film. So I'm planning to take that and try and make a short film that is not, I don't want it to be about the container camera, but more explore what else that thing was, and like having the footage of the people interacting with it and try and use the film as a way to expand on the project and give the feeling of it to those that couldn't come to Kaohsiung and visit it themselves. So thank you.
I'm so glad you're making a film of it. I was feeling like I want to go to the container camera. So thank you for giving us this opportunity to engage with it. Trolls is also giving an artist talk as part of RestFest. So if you're interested in hearing more, I think it's going to be really, really lovely, and it's coming up. Rae?
What is next? I am going to be making a music video with one of my friends who's also a filmmaker in this festival, Brittany Appleby, who did Resting Place, which was part of the first program. And I'm very excited for that to shoot in the spring. And I think I'm also starting to develop a work around how in Canada, people who are on disability lose access to the monthly payments if they become common law with a partner or get married, and just kind of raising more awareness around that and exploring that too. So yeah, thank you so much for including my film in the festival and hosting this panel.
Thank you, Rae. It's so cool to hear about this collaboration between two of the filmmakers in this program. It's so special, and what an important topic. So thank you for doing that. I see that Moya asked if you've seen Patrice.
It's a film about a disabled woman who wants to move in with her partner and she can't. Well, it's mostly about her, but it's really, really a lovely film.
I will look it up. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, you're welcome.
I also see a question in the chat about if y'all are on social media and where more of your works can be found. I see Jay's putting his Instagram in the chat, also in the bios of everyone, in the descriptions of their films. You'll find those links as well. So that is there. And lots of links coming in the chat, which is great, to be able to stay in touch with these wonderful filmmakers and get to see these works that everyone's talking about. Yeah, I think that we're at the end of this panel time. Um, I want to give space if there's anything else y'all want to share or say. Um, Otherwise, just sharing lots of gratitude for being here and sharing space with all of you today. and getting to enjoy your work throughout the rest of the month. So thank you, thank you.
At the very end, I would like to share the three gongs on the bell from the temple that we went to for the midnight ceremony of Lunar New Year. As we are now, I am in the year of the horse already. I think most of you are transitioning tonight, but we went to a really beautiful ceremony where they opened the outer temple doors at midnight to welcome the gods in for the rejuvenation of the universe. And in that there's a praying session, and they ring both the drum and the bell. And I have a recording of the three bells that are being hit at the very end of the ceremony. So I hope it's possible to hear it from this, but we'll see.
That sounds like a perfect way to end. I don't know if you know about how to turn on the microphone mode for sound for musicians, but we might be able to hear it without. So could give it a go.
And there might be a little bit of crowd noise guzzling around and a scooter coming by on the outside street. Okay, I'll try.
If you're playing it, I think that Zoom is
Is
that we don't want to hear it.
cutting it off.
Yeah.
I have no idea how to fix that.
In the audio at the bottom of your screen, the little thing that you would click to turn on mute, in the arrow, if you click the arrow under microphone modes, you can turn on original sound for musicians, and that should fix that.
That should do it. Okay, we'll try one more time, and otherwise, thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you. And I saw some hearts coming up. Yeah, what a great way to end. So thank you, everyone. Hope to keep in touch.
Thank you, Bec and everyone.
Thank you for hosting, and thank you, Moya.
Thank you. Take care.
Moya speaking. Thank you to all of you and your amazing work. And you're getting bunches of thank yous and in the chat with exclamation points. Moya actually said the ambient was cool though when we didn't hear the bell.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Moira.